Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you to this special webinar on comparative world literatures with the theme Masculinity Studies. On behalf of Hindi University, it gives me immense pleasure to extend my heartfelt greetings to our esteemed Vice Chancellor Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, our respected speakers Dr. A.M. Sarvade sir and Dr. Iros Vaja sir, our convener Dr. Paromita Das madam, distinguished faculty members, dear students, and participants joining us from different places. In recent years, masculinity studies has emerged as an important field within literary and cultural studies. It explores how ideas of masculinity are constructed, represented, and contested across different cultures and historical contexts. Through this lens, literature becomes a powerful space to question stereotypes, examine gender power relations, and understand how masculinities intersect with class, race, caste, sexuality, and nationhood. Today's session aims to initiate critical conversations around these questions, moving beyond fixed notions of gender towards more inclusive, analytical, and comparative frameworks. This webinar is a part of our ongoing initiative to engage with interdisciplinary and global perspectives in comparative literature. By bringing together renowned scholars, teachers, and students, we hope to open meaningful dialogues and reflect on new ways of reading text and cultures. We are truly honored to have with us Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Nandini Sahu Madam, whose vision and encouragement continuously inspire all of us. We are equally delighted to welcome our distinguished speakers, Dr. A.M. Sarvade sir, Professor, Department of English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur, and Dr. Iros Vaja sir, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of English, MVM Arts College, Rajkot, Gujarat. A very warm welcome to all the teachers, research scholars, and students joining us today. Your active participation and curiosity make such academic spaces meaningful and vibrant. Now, it is my proud privilege to invite a visionary academic leader and a distinguished literary voice, Professor Nandini Sahu Madam, Vice Chancellor, Hindi University, West Bengal, to deliver the opening address of today's webinar. Professor Nandini Sahu is not only a renowned academician, but also a celebrated Amazon's best-selling author, professor of English, and former director of the School of Foreign Languages, IGNOU, New Delhi, India. She is an established Indian English poet, creative writer, and folklorist, with 23 books to her credit as author and editor. A double gold medalist during her graduation and post-graduation, Madam has been honored with numerous awards, including the Literary Award, Gold Medal from the Honorable Vice President of India for her contribution to English studies, Michael Madhusudan Academy Award 2024, Lifetime Achievement Award 2024, Tagore Samman 2025, and Honorary Fellowship by the International Academy of Ethics, India. Her areas of research span new literatures, critical theory, folklore, and cultural studies, Hindu studies, Indian knowledge systems, comparative literature, children's literature, and American literature. Ma'am's leadership and vision has been a constant source of inspiration for all of us. It is an honor to have her with us today. Ma'am, we respectfully invite you to deliver the opening address and mark the beginning of this meaningful dialogue on masculinity studies. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madhumita, for this generous introduction. On behalf of Hindi University and on my personal behalf, I invite two eminent scholars Professor M. Sarawade, and then Professor Dr. Iros Vaja to be a part of the ongoing Hindi University Special Lecture Series on Comparative World Literatures vis-a-vis masculinity studies. Well, I'm extremely glad that today we all are here celebrating masculinity studies. Whenever it comes to talk about gender studies, mostly people take up texts vis-a-vis, feminist literary discourses, or they take texts vis-a-vis queer studies, LGBTQ studies, but very rare scholars actually engage with masculinity studies vis-a-vis comparative world literatures. Masculinity studies is not a rejoinder of feminism, as we know, and it's rather a new area of research and pedagogy. It started in 1970s, probably when we all were born, maybe mid 70s it started. I think Professor Vaja, Professor Sarvade, and me, we all are contemporaries. We were really born during that period when masculinity studies was talked about. So, to me, as a scholar of gender studies is incomplete when we talk about only feminism. It's complete when we discuss masculinity studies, feminism, and queer studies all together. So, this is how we have been shaping our classroom teaching, our PhD and MPhil coursework sessions, even our research publications, and everything. And today, two esteemed scholars who are also very, very dear friends are going to talk about this important subject. They are the best brains of the country, and I'm proud and happy that we are hosting them at Hindi University, West Bengal. And Dr. Madhumita, the coordinator of this particular program, she has a PhD in queer in gender studies, where she has talked about queer, she has talked about the many masculinities. She published a book. She came to me with that book and said, "Ma'am, I want to do some webinar or seminar on this subject." I said, "Who else but these two people can actually talk about that?" And then somehow it worked, and then she could collaborate with you. I congratulate you, Madhumita, and I welcome both of you. About the two people that we have invited to Hindi University today, Professor Sarawade and Professor Vaja. I met them in a couple of important meetings in Delhi, and as I told that nobody recommended them to me, I saw their work, and then I thought that probably they should also be in a position to contribute to the Hindi University Special Lecture Series on Comparative World Literatures, which Dr. Paramita is the convener. So this is creating ripples in Indian academia. Everyone is watching this particular lecture series. We are recording it. It will be a part of our YouTube. Many people, I think 45, 50 people have already spoken uh, on various subjects vis-a-vis comparative world literatures. And today's subject is very interesting and very important. No one has actually, as far as I remember, no one has actually spoken much on masculinity studies. How the texts in world literary discourses have dealt with masculinity, which is again not a rejoinder, not a collaboration, not an extension of feminism, but it's an independent area of research and teaching. In future, when we design and develop our syllabus on the comparative world literatures, we will certainly take at least one or two blocks on masculinity studies. That is when I will need the help of both of you to help us, to design the syllabus for us, to recommend interesting and important and seminal texts of masculinity studies for us, for our students. Till then, I think this research and these two lectures will be massively circulated among our students and faculty. We will take this research further. If the faculty members have doubts, they will get in touch with you. Your research papers after the lectures, we will get in touch with you to submit two complete research papers to be a part of our upcoming publication on comparative world literatures. And today I'm going to listen to both of you very carefully. Probably I will have a lot of questions or a lot of issues to discuss with you. I welcome both of you. I am deeply honored to have two of my very dear friends. Professor Vaja, he recently wrote an interesting book on Indian knowledge systems. He sent me the text. It was very interesting. I think I wrote a blurb or something. Did I write a blurb for you?
You have written the review of the book.
Okay. I wrote something for you that I remember. But yes, he has written a very important book on Indian knowledge systems. And Dr. Sarvade, he is very, very famous, very popular. And I put it on record that the two speakers sitting in front of us today, they're not just important and good scholars, they are equally excellent human beings. They reach out to people with all humility and kindness. They are very, very compassionate and they are serious researchers. I'm glad you are here with us today. Let us go back to Dr. Madhumita for formal introductions of both of you and then to your lectures. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your deeply insightful and inspiring address. Your words have truly enriched our understanding of the theme and have set a thoughtful and reflective mood for today's academic dialogue. Your vision and scholarship continue to inspire us all. We are truly honored to have your presence and guidance in this webinar. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Now, it is my great privilege to invite our first distinguished speaker, Dr. A.M. Sarvade, sir. Dr. Sarvade is Professor, Department of English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. He completed his graduation in 1999 and post-graduation in 2001 from Shivaji University and went on to complete his PhD in Applied Linguistics. With more than 20 years of experience as a postgraduate teacher, Dr. Sarvade has made remarkable contributions in the field of linguistics, applied linguistics, post-colonial studies, and new literatures. He has presented papers in nearly 50 national and international seminars and conferences and has published around 50 research papers in reputed journals. His recent book on dialectology in Marathi received the prestigious Narahar Kurundkar Puraskar from the government of Maharashtra. He has also prepared academic books for YCMOU Nasik and has delivered more than 55 invited lectures, plenary sessions, and keynote addresses across the country. In addition, he has successfully completed 3 UGC research projects and guided numerous PhD and MPhil scholars in both linguistics and literature. Sir, we are truly honored to have you with us today. I now warmly invite you to share your valuable insights with all of us. Welcome, sir.
All the best, Professor Sarvade, sir.
Thank you very much, Madhumitaji,
Thank you.
for your kind words. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver a speech here in this webinar series, particularly the Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, our friend, Professor Nandini Sahuji, the organizers, Madhumitaji and Puromita Dasji, my friend, another speaker will be talking about masculinity studies shortly, Dr. Iros Vaja, and dear participants. Well, one fine morning, Madhumita ji called me and then she said that I'm talking from Hindi University, West Bengal, and I want you to deliver a lecture on the topic called masculinity studies. Well, at the outset, I was a bit hesitant. Means I told her because I came to know about her PhD topic as Professor Nandini ji was talking about her that she completed her doctorate in gender studies, and I really appreciate what exactly she said. But well, I in the beginning means a bit hesitant to talk about the topic because we have been talking about feminism, and then one of my colleagues, of course, she is working in masculinity studies, but I never thought of means exploring that area. But and that's why I was thinking of almost denying the things, means denying the invitation, and then. But I thought, well, let us say it is think of it as an opportunity to prepare to read something new, because Professor Nandini ji, she has been all the time after us to read something new, and let me put on record my indebtedness to her, because she is such a versatile person. Means she has been reading in and writing and then working in many areas. She shared so many things, so many wonderful and insightful things with us regarding this, the folklore studies. Means I was really indebted to her because the syllabus that she framed it at IGNOU, and then everything means that we discussed, we come to know about her. And I thought, let us say, means in her guidance, if at all I am reading something and I'll be pursuing some new domain, then it will be okay. And that's why, after all, I accepted the invitation and I said, well, I'll see means how exactly I can do justice to the topic. And I'm here. Well, thank you very much for making me read.
Basically, he could not say no to me.
Yeah, thank you. Making me read something new and then talk about it here. Well, as I went on thinking about masculinity studies, and I discussed it that time. I'll be talking about masculinity studies shortly, and we'll be delivering a speech. One of my friends means he said, we are still talking about feminist studies, and then how is it that you are talking about masculinity studies? Well, that is the first objection that you will see. Means as soon as we find the beginning of masculinity studies somewhere around 1970s, 1980s, as it emerged, I'll share my PPT, of course. The objections and what exactly the reactions of people were at that time, well, they were not very different from the one that I received. Means when I said that I'll be talking about masculinity studies, people said, well, we're talking about women empowerment, we're talking about the other subaltern categories, and then why this masculinity studies? What is the need? Well, and I was also shocked. Means why exactly in patriarchal system when man is at the center, and then why these studies? And when if you are ignorant one, that is going to happen. So this started my quest, and then I went on reading, and I am thankful that I got some good articles, good books, and good interviews to read too. I think some material was also shared by Mutimitaji with me. So that also helped me. But in a way, that is a new experience, and I'm happy that I could, read something. Okay, let us begin with the PPT, because whatever exactly that I've seen means I don't think that I've done something original in this area, because I will read it, and of course what exactly I think about it, what exactly the people have thought of it, how exactly they have acted and reacted and then deliberated the things. Of course, in the very introduction, I think the organizers, Madhumita ji, she has talked about it as literary and then culture studies. Of course, we are relating it, but basically masculinity studies is started, of course, during 1970s, 80s in social sciences, and then it's turned towards, means as the history of feminism is, we have the turn towards this one. If you look at the beginning of this masculinity studies, the birth of men studies, you will find it somewhere around 1980s, or the last part of last quarter of the 20th century. And these early studies were directly or indirectly responding to the idea that masculinity was natural or essential. Means if you look at the domains, all the studies that we are talking about, particularly may it be feminist studies or may it be gay studies or queer theories, the presence of the essential presence of masculinity is taken for granted. And this taking for granted of the masculinity studies rejected the, or this is, let us say, as the word has been used by the scholars, it is unmarked category. Masculinity was thought to be an unmarked category by the scholars, and that's why people were not thinking about it seriously. It was assumed to be there all the time. In social sciences also, the studies were responding to sex role theory. So this particular theory is very crucial, and later on it has been challenged by a psychoanalyst. I will be talking about it shortly, in which the male sex role was taken as a uniform, stable and normative configuration to which actual males do or do not conform. So if you look at this one, this male role theory, and this is how it was conceived. I'm not saying that is the reality, but the conception of this particular male role is very crucial, and it was thought as a uniform, stable and normative configuration. So this is male role is thought to be a uniform, stable and normative configuration, and this is the way, this is the beginning, and this is what has been challenged as the center of the patriarchal system. And that is why when we turn to masculinity studies or masculinity studies, or as it was called in the beginning, male studies, and later on the terms were used, masculinity or masculinities. So you will find that means this is the center. And it explains, means when this journal, Male Studies Review, it was changed to masculinities in 1993. That is the way in which, means the beginning was with the study of male studies, and then the turn to the masculinity studies in 1993. So during the period of transition from the 1980s, the study of male and masculinity remained in close dialogue with feminism. As Professor Nandini ji has rightly pointed out, feminism or feminist studies and the other studies, like for example gay studies or transgender studies or queer theory studies, they cannot be separated from masculinity studies. Well, masculinity, though it has been during the earlier times thought to be a single kind of thing, uniform kind of a model, now people have started accepting that it is not, because so many things have taken place. A lot of water has flowed below the breach, and find this a lot of developments have taken place. And people have started looking at the concept of masculinity from a very different perspective, and this is to be seen. And then that's why when it started, men and masculinity, it was having close dialogue with the feminism or feminist studies. And accordingly, you will find the publication of books like Men in Feminism in 1987 and Endangered Men, the question of male feminist criticism. But of course, when men started studying masculinity studies, the expected criticism is to be there, and it is came in a article, Critical Cross-Dressing, Male Feminist and the Woman of the Year. So this is the article by the well-known feminist critic Elaine Sholter, and she has criticized the enterprise of the masculinist critics, and saying that it is a kind of critical cross-dressing. So she criticizes this stand of the masculinist critics, and she thinks that it is a kind of reaction to feminism or feminist schools. Of course, it is there, but this article has the stand that was taken by Scholder in this article, it seems, has been changed after the studies, various studies of masculinities published afterwards. So, so different definitions you can look at, you can have of masculinity studies given by Broad, one of the important critics of masculinity studies. Broad defines the new main studies in general terms as the study of the masculinities and main experiences as specific and varying historical, social, historical, cultural formations. Earlier, when we talked about the beginning of masculinity studies, we were talking about the uniform and universal kind of experience of male. But this has been challenged, and it is said that the male experience is very much specific. It is and it is constructed social, historical, cultural situation. So the social, historical, cultural situations, they construct the specific male experience, and accordingly that male experience has to be seen as a singular, not the universal one. Horlacher is another scholar who thought, who has deliberated his views about masculinity and literature extensively in the recent book published in 2015. He thinks of masculinity studies as emerging during 1980s is not a conservative backlash. So, like, means he does not accept the idea of Walter that it is a kind of reaction against feminism. Rather, he says that it is a social necessity, because as we have the different roles of masculinity, different models of masculinity, there cannot be a uniform concept of man over the years and across the cultures, or even in a single culture during the synchronic, even in a synchronic dimension, the single kind of identity of man is not possible, and that's why Horlacher thinks that it is a social necessity to have masculinity studies. Another scholar, James Ali Adams, he has reviewed 5 books published during 1980s, and he looks at masculinity studies as he considers masculinity as a central problematic of cultural formation and change, and it became the preoccupation of the anthropologists and sociologists from around 1980s. Of course, as I said, the sociologists, social scientist people, they were the first ones who approached to the study of masculinity. Anthropologists, they are there, and then sociology. In India also, we have the same kind of tradition. In Indian context, whatever that I could read during these 4 or 5 days, I could see that the scholars who have published about masculinity, they have in the very beginning, they are talking about, they are the anthropologists and the sociologists, and they have talked about different issues. And the same could be seen the tradition there in the West. Its origin is always traced back to a reaction to the origin of feminism, particularly the first wave of feminism. Therefore, it is seen as both an extension of and a resistance to first wave feminism. So, so he uses 2 terms. The terms are extension of and a resistance to feminism, first wave feminism particularly. It is extension in the sense that it underlines the importance of gender in structuring human identity and social relations. Male are also a gendered people, like the women. As women are gendered, the queers are gendered, the gays are gendered, so also men are gendered. And accordingly, this gendering process is at the base of all these studies, and accordingly, this human identity and social relations of male, they have to be considered from gender perspective, and that's why it becomes a part and parcel of gender studies. However, it is a reaction against the monolithic understanding of many feminists of the men as the agents of domination. So it's wrong, means Adam says, to consider all men as the agents of domination. So it is a kind of, a monolithic kind of understanding of man, the universal representation of man as the man. So that is what has been rejected by Adams, and he thinks of masculinity studies from this point of view. Armengol, in his article written in 2007, specifically talking about American masculinity in literature, he defines masculinity studies aim to provide new perspectives on men's lives and personal dilemmas as gendered beings, transforming supposedly universal human experiences into ones that are specifically masculine. Moreover, these studies analyze masculinities as socially constructed, context specific, and culture bound. As I said, means the earlier consideration of earlier conception of man and masculinity, it had changed, and many scholars they have accepted this particular notion that masculinities are socially constructed, they are context specific and culture bound. So this is why the anthropologists they also come in the scale in the stream, and the culture studies they it becomes the proper site where this masculinity studies can be explored. So this socially constructed, context specific, and culture bound masculinities they have to be explored. Like most women studies practitioners, the majority of masculinity scholars share the assumption that masculinity and femininity are social and historical rather than biological constructs. Thus, studies of masculinities are particularly concerned with showing how manhood, like all human constructs, can change. So it is never stable. So that is what has been proposed, what has been debated, and what has been accepted. Scholars have now accepted that masculinity is not a stable concept. It goes on changing, and that particular concept has been accepted. As I said, means Joseph Pleck is one of the early practitioners of the psychoanalytical study of male. So he has published a book, The Myth of Masculinity. And in this particular book, he talks about the role identity. So the sex role theory that we talked about in the very beginning. So this particular sex role theory means different roles to different sexes. That particular theory has been taken to task. It has been explored, in fact, to see by Blake, and then whatever his conclusions are, he talks about it here. Now, he says that sex role identity was considered necessary for good psychological adjustments, because during the socialization stages of children, so they are, because this is the socialization, gender-based socialization, and then it is thought that good psychological adjustments they are necessary because of an inner psychological need for it. There is an inner psychological need, and we need to have that kind of psychological development. So this we have to accept the sex roles for the for better psychological adjustments. However, sex role identity was not natural or God-given, but rather learned behavior, in particular from adults, parents, especially a parent of the same sex. Now that is what he has said, means whatever identities they are imposed upon the children during their socialization, they are not God-given, they are not natural, but they are learned behavior or imposed. That is something imposed on the children by the parents, or the children they learn it automatically from the parent of the same sex. Scholars increasingly move to treating masculinity as plural, while accepting that it tends to manifest certain recurring characteristics such as homophobia, power, and dominance over women. Still, though it has been said that masculinity is plural and there are different versions of masculinity, Blake could identify some features which are across these identities the same, and features are homophobia, power, and dominance over women. Since role change over time, the percentage of men who violate such roles is high. Therefore, Blake thinks if violation of the male sex role is normal, then the role cannot in fact define any single norm. Of course, he has challenged. He is talking from theoretical point of view. If we are saying that masculinities are changing, and if the roles are changing from time to time, from culture to culture, so we cannot think of, or we cannot talk about a single norm that can define the behavior of a human being, a person. So Harry brought another important scholar in masculinity studies. He published, he has edited, in fact, you see, a collection of essays, and the title of the book is The Making of Masculinities, The New Men Studies. It was published in 1987, and is another step in the development of masculinity studies. He's critical of the idea of the male sex role. So this is the male sex role. That is the concept which again this he is a sociologist, very broad, and then he also challenges this the male sex role rather than the multiplicity of male roles. His approach is that for him, one of the problems in academy is that while women studies corrects the exclusion of women from the traditional canon caused by androcentric scholarship's elevation of man as a male to man as generic human. The implications of this fallacy for our understanding of men have gone largely unrecognized. Now, this is how means reacting against. Let me tell you one thing that during across this discourse of masculinity studies, as it has been talked by many scholars, because masculinity studies during the beginning part means it started. Uh, uh, it was very popular in Britain and then Germany and then America. That means it was very popular in Europe and America because they claimed that the white middle class man was at the center. It was the means they went on restricting the scope of the center of patriarchal system, and they found that this white middle class man, because later on we are spreading the concept of masculinity and including more and more subaltern people into it. So that requires means to centralize someone, and this particular white middle class man. So that is at the center, and that has been deconstructed again during the post structure or in the fashion of the post structuralism. So we'll be talking about that. But this androcentric scholarship, as it has been talked by Broad, this androcentric scholarship, it challenges the feminist studies. They challenge the androcentric scholarships, and they challenge particularly why exactly man has been elevated to man as a generic human. And of course, it is acceptable kind of thing. And this particular stand of the feminist, that is acceptable because man cannot be at the center. And that is what they have challenged. And accordingly, the explorations have started, explorations began, and we have the masculinity studies. An approach to men as gendered beings, an emerging field of study as a necessary complement to women's studies. And that's why Broad thinks of masculinity studies as concerned with men and who are, as women are, gendered beings. So this is consideration of men or the man as gendered beings, and accordingly, individual man is a gendered being. It is he or she has different experiences, and that's why it needs to be studied from that way, and that's why from that point of view it becomes a necessary complement to women's studies. Various questions about masculinity were asked, including questions about male body, history, and cultural images. Of course, the question means, I could see that there is one article published by Sanjay Srivastava, one of the professors of sociology from JNU. The article is published in EPW in 2015. And he also asked the same question. I'll be coming to that article too by the end of my discussion. But the same thing, the answer I think has been given by Broad here, that when you say that men are gendered beings, you have to ask questions, or you have to ask different questions. And those different questions are concerned with male body, the concept of male body, the history of man, and the cultural image of man. So all these things, they have to be questioned, and these questions only can lead you to the true understanding of man. So that is why what the masculinist or masculine studies do. Of particular importance in making the male body visible as a gendered body was the presence of masculinity on screen. So Broad focuses his attention on the presentation of man, or presentation of masculinity rather, on the screen, which consequently led to an increase in the studies of masculinity in film and the media. So how exactly masculinity is presented in film and media, Horlacher talks about the role of masculinity in literature. We'll be coming to that. But film and media, it can be taken simultaneously. They are talking about the way the masculinity is presented in film and media. It shapes the idea of masculinity, and it cultures or it nurtures the idea of masculinity in the minds of the younger ones. And they try to be like that. So that is how the game has been played. So it is, after all, the presentation of masculinity on screen that is at the center. That is what Broad identifies, or Broad things. Another important scholar in masculinity studies, of course from social sciences, is the historian sociologist Michel Kimmel. And he's one of the best known and prolific scholars of men and masculinity. Extensively writes on ways in which masculinity is constructed culturally and historically. So we have the cultural and historical formation of masculinity. So he looks at the cultural and historical implications of the way the identity of man and masculinity is defined, is best. Kimmel defines the two key elements of writing about men as men, and the two elements about the writings, because he has edited a book exploring the history of men in American literature. So how exactly man is presented, or masculinity is presented in American text during the last 2 centuries. That is what the book does. And in that book, Kimmel has given the introduction. And in that introduction, he says that he defines two key elements of writing about men as men. And the first of them is to chart how the definition of masculinity had changed over time. That masculinity, or the concept of masculinity, or the definition of it, is not the same. It has went on changing during the historical times, and that he has underlined, that he focuses. And second, to explore how the experience of manhood has shaped the activities of American men, as it is the American history of man that he has explored. He talks about the experience of manhood, how this experience of manhood, it shaped the activities of American man. As it has seen, means we have seen before sometime, the masculinity on screen, it shapes the minds of the younger generation. So also the masculinity in the books, it shapes the activities of American men. And that is why he talks of masculinity from cultural and historical perspective. Another important, very, very crucial concept in the history of masculinity studies is hegemonic masculinity. And this is associated with a sociologist again, R.W. Connell, and his book Masculinities published in 1995. So, of course, Connell has used and revised the concept of hegemony from Gramsci to mean the configuration of gender practice, which embodies the currently accepted answer to the problems of legitimacy of patriarchy, which guarantees, or is taken to guarantee, the dominant position of men and the subordination of women. So this is the dominant position of women and subordination of women. So this is the hegemonic picture. And this hegemonic picture guarantees these two things: dominant position of men and the subordination of women. So it is the hegemony created by someone, that is what he thinks. So he defined as the question of how particular group of men inhabit position of power and wealth, and how they legitimate and reproduce the social relationships that generate their dominance. The dominant, in order to generate their dominance, they produce some text, and that is done by the men who are in the position of power and wealth. So look at this again, the kind of hegemonic situation that Connell talks of, he identifies. And some men are responsible for presenting that kind of image of man as in a dominant position, and this is necessary for guaranteeing the subordination of women. Thus, hegemonic masculinity in a given context establishes subordinate masculinities as well. For him, the construction of masculinity takes place through commercial mass media, the gendered division of labor, and the state. These social relations are inextricably linked to the gendered psyche, meaning that the study of hegemonic masculinity should take both socio-historical as well as the psychological factors into account. Now, the importance given to mass media, gender division of labor, and the state, the role of the state particularly, these concepts, they are incorporated into the discussion of hegemony now. Now, people have started to look at this concept, how exactly, even in one of the papers reported by by one of the Indian in one of the Indian writers' papers. I'll be talking about that because they relate the concept of masculinity to ecology and this economics. So the same kind of attempt was also made by Cornell in 1995. And that is associated with the division of labor and then the media, commercial mass media. Very good work of R.W. Cornell in terms of the introduction of the term hegemonic masculinity. We also have the relation between masculinity and race. So the spread, of course, it has to be, since now in 2025, we are talking about masculinity in India in a webinar like this one. Though it started somewhere around 50 years back in Europe and America. So its spread has to be seen. So the spread has made people to apply the concept of masculinity and masculinity studies to different domains, different cultures, different societies. And the result has also been mentioned. It has been talked about. For example, it began with Robert Staple. Of course, Broad has also identified the thing that the masculinity of American man, black man particularly, and the white man, they are different. So accordingly, Robert Staples, he wrote a book, Black Masculinity, the Black Male's Role in American Society. And he thinks that as a starting point, I see the black male as being in conflict with the normative definition of masculinity. So he restricts now his focus on the black man, the African American man. And he says that the normative definition of masculinity, as I said, this white middle class male, so that is at the center. So that is called the normative definition of masculinity. That again has been challenged. Means he says, Robert Staple says that black men doesn't suit in the normative definition of masculinity. Staple defined black men's dual dilemma. Their subordination as a racial minority has more than cancelled out their advantages as male in the larger society. So they are subordinate, they are subaltern, and that is how he looks at the identity of black male. David Ng analyzes cultural representation of similar attempts have been made by various scholars like David Ng, Mrinalini Sinha, and some Jewish scholars. For example, David Ng has analyzed the cultural representation of Asian Americans' masculinity as symbolically castrated. Mrinalini Sinha studied gender constructs of Asian men as effeminate during the British Empire. Now look at the words that are used and the ideas, the identities that have been propagated, because these are all loaded words. Means what I think means work on Jewish masculinity treats a variety of questions related to culture, ethnicity, and religion, including its perceived effeminacy and its status as marginalized. So the racial, let us say, dimension to masculinity has also been given, and that has also been explained, and it is explored by many. There is again anthropological turn. There is one more scholar. David Gilmour, who is again very, very famous in masculinity studies or in gender studies in general. And his book, Manhood in Making, the Cultural Concepts of Masculinity. So he has written that book, and he expresses his views about, means of course the conclusions. He studies what it means to be a man, to be a real man in a number of Western and non-Western cultures. This is a culture-specific idea. He says that is what is a real man, what is a true man. So that is a culture-specific idea, and that's why he has studied many Western and non-Western cultures. The regularity that interests him is the often dramatic ways in which cultures construct an appropriate manhood, the presentation or imaging of the male role. Now, this culture is constructing the appropriate manhood. It is not the universal kind of manhood. Rather, the culture-specific manhood has been created to suit the purposes. And this presentation or this configuration of that culture-specific construct is important to us. And this is a kind of an imaging of the male role. It is not the real male role, rather the imaging of the male role. Conclusion that he has drawn from the study: manhood is the social barrier that societies must erect against entropy, human enemies and forces of nature, time, and all the human weaknesses that endangered group life. What I think means the stories of mythological figures, the historical heroes, all these, they are the stories of the manhood. What I think means, when I relate these opinions of the scholars to the reality, I could see that the myths and the legends of different men and the heroes, they are the concepts of the manhoods, and they are deliberately constructed by the societies. And of course, the purpose is open. Connell, the same scholar that we have referred to earlier, calls for work on global masculinity and sketches out three major types of globalizing masculinity: masculinities of conquest and settlement, that is how the conquest and settlement have taken place; masculinities of empire; and masculinities of post-colonialism and neoliberalism. Now, I could see means when we read as the students and the teachers of literature, when we go on reading the texts that were produced particularly, or that they are related to the colonial discourse, we find that many writers, they talk about the fear of white women, of the colonized men. So this colonized men and the white women, particularly the fear of white women about the colonized men, all these things, it has been nicely explained in Doris Lessing's novel Grass is Singing. So for that matter, that can be seen. So all these relations, they could be seen, means they have been explored, means they have been talked of, they have been theorized here. Well, when you turn to the masculinity studies in India, as I said, I was referring to the same paper. In 2000, one paper was published in EPW. The title is Understanding Masculinity by Radhika Chopra, Chaitali Dasgupta, and Mandeep Janeja. And they have reported the working of the workshop. They organized one workshop, and then they reported the conclusions of the 4 papers. Out of them, I will just refer to the a couple of papers. Lester Contino is from Health Policy Research Unit at the Institute of Economic Growth, and he presented the paper entitled Ecology, Kinship, Caste and Sexuality Towards Locating Masculinity in Cultural Landscape. And he referred to, or he studied, he had his fieldwork in multi-caste, multi-tribe village from Western and Southern Gujarat village. So from 1993-1995. And what exactly he found, that Contino looked at the gaps in the anthropological knowledge of the manhood, manliness and male identity, male sexuality and male roles, arguing that these are extremely fluid concepts with specific histories, locations in particular power structures and distinctive cultural landscapes. Now, Contino, he visited, means that particular village, and after collecting the data, after visiting the villagers and knowing their ideas about man, manhood, manliness, male identity, male sexuality, etc. He come to know because his concern, why exactly means I will be coming to that point. They refer to means he refers to because he's from the you can see health policy research unit, and that's why the then thought very crucial disease HIV/AIDS was taken into understanding, and from that point of view, he was looking at the involvement of male in this particular. That is, of course, a sociological and research related to the the medicine. But still, he talked about the concept that this fluidity cannot exclusively be traced through the discourse of desire and pleasure. So this is not only related to the discourse of desire and pleasure, but needs to be related to the issues of political ecology. Now he has, as Cornell there talks of, we have the exploration of this political ecology. So this political ecology defines the gender roles, as we have the case in Western countries, whereby it has been identified and where it has been talked about by the others. So also in an Indian village, he finds that the political ecology decides or it shapes, it constructs the fluid manhood. So the concepts are very fluid. The concepts of manhood, they have been constructed. Similarly, Radhika Chopra, she has studied the same concept again from one of the rural Punjab, one of the villages field work she has conducted in rural Punjab. Her article was Knowing Men and Ethnographer's Dilemma. She was an ethnographer and she spoke of different modes of being and becoming male. She drew on her fieldwork in Punjab, rural Punjab. Chopra suggested that it was not possible to speak of a male world. There are instead fragments through and within which the practices of being and becoming male are differently mapped and process of knowing. These fragments is highly gendered. Now this is gendering of the process that she refers to. Another paper in EPW that was published in 2013, Rumit Chaudhary, and I think this researcher is from Kolkata itself. And he has, of course, as Horchaler does, means when we from the time we started talking about male studies, or from the time when masculinity has become the unmarked category, it is associated with violence and rash behavior. So this is the media, mass media, and the views it has been expressed, and that is the association. So that is what he challenges, and he says that he, of course, is of the view that men's emotions of fear and care, they need to be accepted and they need to be propagated. So there is another version of human being, male man also, and that is of fear and care. So it is not all the time violent and rash behavior that defines man or masculinity. Rather, many male, they are fearful of law, they care for people, and that aspect of their masculinity has to be also accepted. I also referred to one name, that means before some time I talked about Sanjay Srivastava in his 2015 article Masculinity Studies and Feminism, Authoring the Self in EPW. So he asked the question, and I think Broad has already answered this questioning the man. The same question can be seen, but can men as social beings take part in a conversation that seeks to dismantle their social cells? The very social cells that are constructed by media, will men be ready to dismantle themselves? That is the very crucial question, and I like it. And but the way Srivastava explores the things, I like it very much. Sanjay Srivastava defines masculinity as socially produced but embodied ways of being. And then, of course, he differentiates between the two related concepts. One is patriarchy, and the other one is masculinity. And look at the way that he uses these words. Patriarchy refers to a system of organizing social life that is premised on the idea of superiority of all men to women. That is what is patriarchy. So, superiority of all men to women. Masculinity, on the other hand, is not only a relationship between men and women, but also between men. Hence, we might say that while patriarchy makes men superior, masculinity is the process of producing superior men. So, masculinity produces superior men. So, when the idea of masculinity has been propagated through media and other things, the idea of Superman or superior man is generated and it is disseminated. Of course, by the end of my presentation, I am now turning to the relation between literature and masculinity. And Horlacher, in his article published in 2015 in a book, Configuring Identity Masculinity, that is the title of the article also, and the title of the book that he has edited. In this article, he has explored the relation between literature and masculinity. But in the very beginning, he has said that masculinity studies is, as we have seen earlier, it is a social necessity. Because on the one hand, we have the idea of man as the universal human being, as the man representing the human. And at the same time, we have the data from World Health Organization and federal, some agency that he refers to, specifically from America, where men are suffering both physical and psychological, diseases due to a kind of pressure built by the society consulting the male roles. So this, this contradiction requires that masculinity study has to be institutionalized, and he supports that. Well, according to Horlacher, many of the most influential approaches to masculinity studies today are nearly influenced by sociological, historical, literary, and neutral biomedical knowledge. They collect and analyze gender-specific data with regard to violent behavior, life expectancy, drug abuse, and the susceptibility to particular diseases. Now, these are the issues related to male because of the violent behavior and the rash behavior, as it has been associated with male gender role. So these things have been explored, and it is found that male are susceptible to these particular diseases. These and such studies have shown that in postmodern society, the construction of a monolithic or a singular male gender identity has become problematic and increasingly impossible. However, at the same time, the unrestricted plurality of constructing male gender identity has also become problematic and crisis-free. On the one hand, we cannot have the single and universal male gender identity. But at the same time, if we go on pluralizing it, because as there are men, there will be different identities. So this will be unrestricted plurality of male gender role. So that will not be useful. And that's why here he says the role of literature comes in. Peter F. Murphy has emphasized the role that literature has played in reinforcing the norm of manhood. As mass media and other media, they are responsible for reinforcing or constructing the idea of manhood. So also Murphy thinks literature is also reinforcing or is responsible for reinforcing the norm of manhood. Vera Nunning has focused the contribution of the fictional construction of masculinity in literature and stresses the immense social and cultural levels of the concept of masculinity that are disseminated and to some extent critiqued in literary and non-literary text. So she understands, she underlines the social and cultural relevance of the concept of masculinity and how exactly it has been disseminated and sometimes critiqued in literary and non-literary text. Another important critic, Clifford Greaves, those studies have produced their description of simple narratives that are question the validity of dominant master narratives of masculinity. So simple narratives in a literary text, they can be the questions of, they can be kind of a challenge to the master narratives of masculinity sometimes. So the way the literature presents the concept of masculinity, manhood and masculinity, they are interesting. Now, due to these upheavals in most of the disciplines dealing with masculinity and gender, there has been shift of focus on narrative modes and structures. That is, stories and genres as the most important components of historical and current configuration of masculinities. So, how the stories and story buildings, I'll be sharing, and that in 2008, I think there is one paper. I'll be referring to that paper. I think I will not refer to, but I will read. I didn't take anything from that paper here. But the man in the fairy tales, how exactly the image of man is presented in fairy tales, very interesting. Means Professor Nandini ji is here. She has worked in folk studies, and then in folk studies also we have the construction of masculinity. So how exactly man is constructed? So that can be an interesting topic for exploration. Now, this due to these upheavals, means how exactly the stories and different genres they are contributing to the configuration of masculinity, that becomes important. Horlacher therefore writes, narration is about to become a key concept for the study of masculinity. So how exactly narration is used? So the narration, the type of narration, not only within British, American and German literary and cultural studies, but also in sociology, history and psychoanalysis. The way the narration has been, used. So again, it comes to language. Of course, he has also referred to language, the way the language is used. So that is hegemonic kind of representation. He therefore thinks of masculinity from this perspective, or to be more precise, important aspects of masculinity could be conceptualized and understood as a narrative which takes on different forms in different contexts and at different times. Now look at these things: different forms, different context and different times. Now these three dimensions we have to think of: different forms of narration, different context of narration and different times of narration. And these narrations of different times and different context and different forms, they are going to shed more light on the concept of masculinity. He also considers of gender identity as a narration that is constantly characterized by a certain fluidity or instability, by a precarious employment and a negotiation of change and mutability, with the postulation of a true gender identity being nothing but a regulatory function. Gender identity could then be seen as a potentially unstable, contradictory and evolving cultural product akin to language and the narrative operations of literature. So this is how means Horlacher has tried to relate the literary and social studies of masculinity, and he has also brought in language. So the role of language and the way the manhood is presented in literature, they are all becomes important. Gender identity could then be understood as being created through a metaphorical act of writing that produces its precarious unity and renders it a narrative artifice, privileging a presence or identity that does not exist outside language. So outside language, there is no existence of this unity. But language, this narration, produces manhood, produces masculinity, which is unified. And this concept of unified masculinity, that is at the center of masculinity or patriarchal system, let us say. Commenting on the role of literary text, Horlacher writes, if this assumption is correct, then the literary text could really be seen as a privileged space and epistemological medium where the manifold mechanisms of configuring ever different and divergent masculinities in the discursive condition becomes readable, knowable, and thereby also rewritable. So literature has to be, taken into account. And this is the list of the articles and the things that I will read. So I was talking about the fairy tales and youth violence and transformation, the article published in 2018. Very good articles I could find. That is what I have to miss. As coming to means what do we say, views about masculinity studies means the way it started with a very limited kind of beginning, a kind of some assumptions and the criticism and the reactions and whatnot means during the early phase. But later on, it took different dimensions, and those ways in which masculinity has been explored both in the social sciences and languages on literatures. That is really rewarding, and whatever understanding of masculinity that we have today is all about or all due to these studies. And therefore means I too come to know about all these things about masculinity and masculinity studies only due to this speech, this session that I have to talk about. I again thank the organizers for inviting me and making me read something about a topic that I didn't so far. I lament why I didn't. This gendered identity and masculinity, of course, or masculinity studies is again a study in a very crucial part of gender studies. With this, I end my speech. I thank each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful and enriching address. Your thought-provoking perspectives and deep scholarship have added immense academic value to today's discussion on masculinity studies. We truly appreciate the clarity, depth, and conviction with you shared with your ideas. Sir, your contribution has set a strong intellectual foundation for this session, and we are grateful for your time and presence. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. It is now my honor and privilege to invite our second distinguished speaker, Dr. Iros Vaja, sir, a well-known academic and a leading voice in English literature. Dr. Vaja, sir, is currently serves as Associate Professor and Head of the Department of English at MVM Arts College, Rajkot, Gujarat. He is an Executive Council member of the Indian Association for Canadian Studies and former chairperson of the Board of Studies in English at Saurashtra University, a role in which he served with distinction for 3 successive terms. A prolific scholar and researcher, Dr. Vaja has presented numerous papers at national and international conferences and seminars, and has chaired several academic sessions. His research work has been published in many reputed journals in 2016. He represented India at the annual general meeting of IACS in Ottawa, Canada. He has also participated in international academic events in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and Dubai. His outstanding contributions have been recognized with several awards, including the Chanakya Award 2008 for Social and Eco-Educational Services and the Vedant Excellence Award in 2020 for Education and Research. Dr. Vaja's academic journey is truly remarkable. Holding a master's in English, a PhD in English literature, a master's in philosophy, a master's in journalism and mass communication with first rank, a second PhD in mass communication, as well as degrees in law and creative writing. He even holds a patent for an AI-based vocabulary acquiring apparatus reflecting his innovative approach to education and technology. Beyond the classroom, Dr. Vaja is an active voice on radio and television also, a member of several editorial boards, and the author of acclaimed works such as Myths in Girish Karnad's Carnot's Play, a critical study, role of mass media in higher education, and a comprehensive handbook of the Indian knowledge systems. Sir, we are truly honored to have you with us today. I now warmly invite you to share your insights and reflections with all of us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, madam, for detailed introduction. I hope I am audible, I am visible, everything is all right. Madhumita ma'am?
Yes, sir. Definitely, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
very good afternoon and Vande Mataram to Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, Professor Akshay Sarawade from Shivaji University, Kolhapur, coordinator of the webinar, Dr. Madhumita ma'am, convener of the webinar, Dr. Paramita ma'am, respected colleagues, teachers, students, and all the viewers. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and my dear friend, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, the Vice Chancellor, for providing me the opportunity to talk to all of you. It is a great pleasure to join this virtual gathering as a part of the series on comparative literature. Despite the distance of almost 2,200 kilometers, sitting in Rajkot and talking to you in Howrah, almost 2,200 kilometers, we have this wonderful opportunity to connect, to exchange ideas, and to reflect together. Today, I will speak about a topic that is both modern and timeless, that is masculinity studies. When I was invited by the coordinator Madhumita ma'am to speak on this particular topic, I wanted to bring not only the global and theoretical perspectives, but also something that is rooted in my own literary soil, my home state of Gujarat. I wanted to show how the Gujarati literary tradition, through the figures like Narsi Mehta, the 15th century saint poet, and Pannalal Patel, the 20th century realist novelist, has contributed profoundly to our understanding of manhood, compassion, and the moral strength. This talk is divided into several parts. First of all, I'll begin by introducing the idea and scope of masculinity studies. I'm not going to give the detailed description because my friend Professor Akshay Sarawade sir has already given the detailed information regarding masculinity studies. Then I will trace its representation in the world literature. After that, I will move towards the Indian literary tradition. And finally, I will focus on Gujarati literature, especially the contrasting yet harmonious visions of masculinity in two great writers of my state. Number one is Narsi Mehta, and number two is Pannalal Patel. The term masculinity has been properly and in-depth discussed and explained by Professor Sarvade, so I don't need to discuss it again. Masculinity studies is actually a modern field that came up in the late 20th century. It grew alongside feminist theory, queer theory, and cultural studies. All these areas look at how identity, society, and power shape the way people live. They also explore how social expectations affect our behavior, our emotions, and our relationships. Even though the field is modern, the ideas it studies are much older. Literature has always explored human life and human emotions, no? As we have been defining literature as the true reflection of society, or as if I quote Matthew Arnold, he said that literature is the criticism of life. Stories ask questions about love, power, identity, and vulnerability. These questions naturally include men. Writers have long been interested in three important things. Number one, what it means to a man. Number two, how men express themselves. And number three, the last but not the least, is how society expects them to behave. So these three important questions need to be answered. I would repeat, what it means to be a man, how men express themselves, and how society expects them to be. Right. So if these three questions are properly answered, our understanding of masculinity studies would be stronger, would be more proper. Dear colleagues, if we study the history of world literature, it shows men struggling with rules about strength, about courage, and about emotions. For example, in ancient epics like the Mahabharata, Arjun faces challenges about duty, honor, and moral responsibility. If we take the example of Shakespeare's plays, characters like Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, King Lear, they struggle with ambition, fear, certain personal conflicts, etc., etc. Even in modern novels, such as Ernest Hemingway's very famous novel, I would call it a novella because it is less than 100 pages. So, The Old Man and the Sea, the main character, Santiago, faces questions about endurance, pride, and the inner strength. These stories show that masculinity is not just about physical power, it is also about feelings, relationships, choices, and moral challenges. So, if we ask the question to an ordinary person, non-literary person, he would say masculinity, something related to power and something related to physical power. But it is not like that. It is also about relationships, choices, feelings, emotions, moral challenges, so on and so forth. Men face pressure to act in certain ways, but literature often explores their inner doubts and weaknesses. It shows how being a man is complex and that identity is shaped by both society and personal experiences. This is why masculinity is both modern and timeless. I had made the statement in the beginning of the talk that masculinity studies is both modern and timeless. The formal study of it is new, but literature has been exploring these emotions for ages, right from the time of the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, T.S. Eliot, and Ernest Hemingway. So it is something modern and something timeless. By looking at stories from different times and cultures, we can understand how ideas about masculinity have changed and how some struggles remain the same. Certain things are changed, certain things are as they were. So, masculinity studies give us tools to think about men in a deeper way. It helps us see the pressures men face and the way they express themselves. It also helps us to understand how literature reflects, how literature questions, and how literature shapes ideas about manhood across the history. Now, let us try to understand what masculinity studies seeks to explore. What does it explore? It actually grew out of gender studies, as Professor Sarawade has discussed in detail, but it soon became a major field in its own right. You can think of it as both reflection of and an extension of feminist scholarships. For a long time, gender studies mainly focused on women's voices and their experiences, which was absolutely necessary. Feminism questioned centuries of inequality and helped us rethink about the ideas about power, identity, and social rules. But as the conversation widened, scholars began to realize that gender is not just one sided, it is relational. If femininity is shaped by culture and history, then masculinity must be too. It is not something fixed, or it is not something purely natural. It is something society creates, society defines, and constantly reshapes. So the realization opened up a new direction of study in the late 20th century. During the 1980s and 1990s, scholars like Michael Kimmel and R.W. Connell started looking at man and masculinity as subjects worth studying, not just as the default human experience. Kimmel, who was an American sociologist, he examined how culture and society shape the idea of manhood. Connell, he was an Australian scholar. He offered deep insights into how gender and power work together in the society. Kimmel's wonderful book, Manhood in America, that was published in 1996, and Connell's wonderful book, Masculinities, which was published in 1995. These two books became the foundational works in this area. So for the viewers, I would just repeat, there are two names, Kimmel and Connell. Kimmel, as I talked earlier, he was uh, an American sociologist, and Connell, he was an Australian scholar. They have written two different books. The first is Manhood in America, that came out in 1996. In the second book, Masculinities, that was published in 1995. These two books have become foundational works in this particular area. Around the same time, Judith Butler argued that gender is not something we are by nature. It is something we do. So these two words are to be kept in mind. She said that gender is not something we are. It is something we do. So every gesture, every tone, every action becomes part of a performance that reinforces what society labels as masculine or feminine. In that sense, masculinity is not a fixed identity. It is a role that has to be constantly performed, proven, and maintained. So to say, masculinity studies is not about blaming men. Most people believe that masculinity studies is about blaming men, but it's not like that. It is about understanding the social scripts that tell men how they are supposed to behave, feel, and express themselves. These scripts can give some men privilege, but they also limit and pressure others. The field explores how such ideas are created, maintained, and challenged in places like families, schools, workplaces, religion, media, literature, and whatnot. And literature, of course, is where these ideas come alive most vividly. In novels, in poems, in plays or stories, we see men struggling with expectations, showing love and vulnerability, and redefining what it means to be strong and moral. So, masculinity studies is not just a theory; it is a way of reading the human story. It helps us to see how societies imagine manhood, how men live within, and how writers give those struggles voice, meaning, and sometimes redemption. Now let us look at how Western literature explores the idea of masculinity. The idea of manhood has changed constantly in the Western literature. Each age, right from Elizabethan age to the modern age or postmodern age, each age has defined masculinity in its own way, through power, through virtue, and through vulnerability. In ancient Greece, if we go back to ancient Greece, heroism meant strength and glory. Say, for example, Achilles in Iliad shows pride and emotion, while Odysseus in Odyssey represents intelligence and endurance. The medieval knight combined courage with honor and devotion. Strength was balanced by virtue. In the Renaissance, that is 16th century or the Elizabethan age, Shakespeare portrayed men like Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, King Lear as conflicted and human, showing masculinity as uncertain and emotional. The industrial age, I'm talking about, the Victorian age, gave us the image of self-made men that we see in Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy. Yet beneath all that discipline lay hidden story of loneliness, frustration, and emotional suppression. Many men try to live up to society's ideals, but in doing so, they often lost touch with their own feelings. Say, for example, Charles Dickens captures this through characters like Pip. Pip is the character of his beautiful novel Great Expectations, came out in 1861. And one more character, the character of David Copperfield, is the character of famous novel David Copperfield that was published in 1950. This struggle, I'm talking about two characters of the same novelist, Pip and David. This struggle between ambition and affection. If we take the case of Hardy, Thomas Hardy, then Hardy reveals how duty and desire pull people apart. Both these writers of the same age, that is the Victorian age, industrial era, both these writers show that progress often demands personal cost, the sacrifice of one's emotional self. Uh, Now, it is time to look at the masculinity in the Indian context, because in India also, we have the same type of feelings, we have the same type of concepts. In Indian literature, masculinity has a very different meaning. Concept in the West was different. Concept in the East, that is India, is different. Unlike the Western idea that often links manhood with power and control, Indian thought connects it with dharma. Dharma, that is virtue, balance, and self-control. A true man, according to Indian philosophy, Indian writing, is known not by how he rules others, but by how he rules himself with wisdom and compassion. Say, for example, in the Mahabharata, this idea is very clear. Arjun's struggles on the battlefield is not about fear. He was not afraid of anyone, but about the right and the wrong. Though a great warrior, he questions whether violence can ever be just. Then Krishna reminds him that the true Purush, the true man, the complete man, acts without ego, does his duty with detachment, and finds strength in inner calm. Here, masculinity means self-control and not domination. If we take up the example of the Ramayana carries the same vision. Lord Ram's courage lies in patience and moral strength. He gives up personal happiness for truth and duty. He faces pain, he faces exile, he faces loss with dignity and kindness. His power is quiet, steady, and rooted in character. The Bhakti movement later gave this idea a new shape. Saints like Kabir, Mirabai, Surdas, then Tukaram, then of course Narsi Mehta, they broke barriers of caste and gender. They saw love, humanity, and devotion, often called feminine traits, as signs of a true spiritual strength. Narsi Mehta's songs taught us that real manhood lies in service and compassion. To him, a man of God loves all beings and all lives truthfully. Kabir also mocked pride and taught that all souls are equal beyond gender and status. These poets offered a new image of manhood, one based on moral courage and inner awakening rather than power or dominance. In Indian literature, through its epics and devotional poetry, they just show that masculinity is not about aggression. It is about self-realization, empathy, and balance. This this ideal man unites strength with compassion, intelligence with humility, and power with peace. Now, it is the right time to move to Gujarati literature, because I'm going to talk about two prominent writers of Gujarat. Gujarati literature, so we had started from the west, that is Greece and Greek and Latin, then to English, then to India. Now we talk about the home state. Gujarati literature carries forward India's spiritual and humanist spirit, but it gives it a voice of its own. Over the centuries, Gujarati writers have shown that real manhood is not about power or status. It is about empathy, it is about honesty, it is about emotional strength. In songs, in stories, and in Gujarati novels, the ideal man is the one who lives with compassion, integrity, and endurance. Uh, Two writers express that this concept the best. They are Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel. And this is the reason why I have chosen these two writers to study masculinity in literature, Gujarati literature, more specifically. Though they lived in different times, as I told you earlier, Narsi Mehta belongs to 15th century, while Pannalal Patel belongs to 20th century. Their ideas of manhood connect deeply. Narsi Mehta shows that he shows the spiritual side of masculinity. In his bhajans, strength comes from love, humility, and devotion. A true man, according to Narsi Mehta, feels others' pain. You must have heard that song, no? Vaishnav Jan to tene kahiye, je peed parai jane re. Who is Vaishnav Jan? Who is God's person? Vaishnav Jan is one who understands the pain of others. So we don't have the choice to take birth in one particular caste or one particular community, but we can be Vaishnav by our own karma, by our own deeds. Pannalal Patel, 20th century writer, he shows the human and social side. His characters face poverty, injustice, and suffering with courage. For Pannalal Patel, being a man means staying kind and honest even when the life is hard. His heroes are grounded, humble, and strong in spirit. Together, Narsi and Patel, they give us a complete picture of Gujarati masculinity. They blend the spiritual with the social, the inner with the outer, and their work in their works, a man's worth lies not in control or in dominance, but in compassion, truth, and moral strength. Gujarati literature, at its heart, celebrates manhood as an emotional and moral journey, one that still feels real and relevant today. Now, let us move to Narsi Mehta. He lived about 600 years ago in the 15th century in the town of Junagadh, which is almost 100 kilometers away from the city where I live in Rajkot. And he is remembered as the first great poet of Gujarati literature, and we often call him Adi Kavi. Adi Kavi. But Narsi Mehta was much more than a poet. He was not simply a poet. He was a saint and reformer who believed that love was greater than ritual, and that devotion should unite the people, not divide them. That is the core philosophy of Narsi Mehta. He sang in simple Gujarati so that even ordinary villagers, even a common man, could understand the language of faith. In his songs, Krishna is not a distant god. Krishna is a friend. Krishna is mischievous child, and Krishna is a beloved. His poems called padas are full of warmth, full of music, and full of emotion. One of them is, as I told you earlier, Vaishnav Janto Tenere Kahiye. It became world famous centuries later when Mahatma Gandhi made it his favorite bhajan. It speaks of It speaks of compassion, it speaks of honesty and service to others. The very essence of what it means to be a human. There are also beautiful legends about Narsi Mehta. People say that once when Narsi Mehta had nothing to offer for his daughter's wedding, Kuvarbai, daughter's name was Kuvarbai, Lord Krishna himself came to his rescue in the form of a wealthy merchant. In another story, when he was humiliated by the fellow people for singing with so-called low-caste devotees, divine voices defended him before everyone. Whether or not we take these stories literally, they tell us something real about faith that never bends before pride or prejudice. Narsi Mehta's message was quite simple. God lives where love and truth lives. He dreamed of a society where no one is untouchable and where worship is not a show but a feeling that connects every heart. Even today, in the 21st century, his songs are sung in temples and streets across the state of Gujarat. They remind us that poetry can be prayer and that devotion can also be an act of rebellion against injustice. So when we talk about Narsi Mehta, we are really talking about the timeless voice of humanity, timeless voice of love and equality, a voice that still echoes in the heart of Gujarat and beyond. In his immortal bhajan, Vaishnav Janto Tene Kahiye, he describes the true human being, the true man, as one who feels the pain of others. This simple line captures profound ethical philosophy. For Narsi Mehta, strength, masculinity does not mean hardness. It means the ability to emphasize, to feel deeply, and to act with compassion. In his verses, the male devotee becomes both masculine and feminine, right? Gopi Bhav. In Gujarati, we call it Gopi Bhav. The devotee becomes the Gopi, uh, embodying completeness through love. This smoothness anticipates modern discussion in queer theory and gender studies, where identity is seen as dynamic rather than fixed. From a comparative perspective, Narsi's vision parallels that of Rumi. Rumi, as most of you know, he was a Persian poet, he was a mystic and Sufi philosopher uh, who saw divine love as the dissolution of the self. When Narsi's worldview remained firmly grounded in the Indian ethos of bhakti, the idea that emotional surrender is the highest form of strength. Thus, his masculinity is devotional and moral. He redefines the male as a being of heart, not hierarchy. After Narsi Mehta, we next turn to Kanalal Patel, who celebrates the peasant as the true hero of Gujarati life and culture. Unlike Narsi Mehta, who sang of divine love, Patel wrote about the struggles and dignity of ordinary people, common men. He was one of the first writers to bring rural Gujarat to modern literature in real, honest way. Patel didn't come from a wealthy or educated background. He grew up among farmers and laborers, and their hardships shaped his imagination. His stories carry the dust of the village, the rhythm of folk speech, and the everyday heroism of common life. His most famous novel, most of you have heard the name Manvini Bhavai, which means the human experience. This novel has been translated in many languages of the world, including English. It is a masterpiece. It tells the story of famine, hunger, and endurance in a small village. But the novel is not just about suffering, it is about courage, it is about compassion and the will to live. The book won the Gnanpith Award, one of India's highest literary honors, and was later made into a film that touched many hearts. What makes Pannalal Patel's writing special is its honesty. He never painted village life as pure and perfect, nor did he dismiss it as backward. He showed both its light and its shadows. It is beauty. He talked about its beauty, its pain, its humor, and its struggles. To the characters like Kalu and Hirabai and Ganga, he gave voice to those who were often ignored, the poor, the landless, and especially women who carried immense emotional and physical burdens. At the heart of his vision was deep humanism. Like Narsi Mehta, he believed in compassion and equality. But while Mehta spoke through spirituality, Patel spoke through realism. His pen became his way of serving the truth. Over the time, he wrote more than 50 novels and hundreds of short stories capturing every shade of human feeling: love, loss, hope, betrayal, endurance, and whatnot. His works opened a new chapter in Gujarati fiction and inspired generations of writers after him. When we think of Pannalal Patel, we think not just of a novelist, but of a historian of Gujarat soil and soul. Remember these two words. We are not talking about, or we don't remember Pannalal Patel as a novelist only, but he is a historian of Gujarati soil and Gujarati soul, SOUL. The writer who turned the everyday life of ordinary people into timeless art. Say, for example, in Manabini Bhavai, said during the famine of 1899 to 1900, he portrays the endurance of villagers who face hunger and death with courage. His hero is not a warrior or a ruler or like Macbeth or King Lear or Othello, but a simple farmer whose strength lies in endurance. Because masculinity, we are talking about strength, we are talking about courage. Here, an ordinary man, look at his courage, study his endurance power. Patel's world is harsh, nature is cruel, poverty is unending, but his people survive with dignity. They are not loud or aggressive, they are moral and compassionate. For Patel, masculinity is not about power or dominance. It is ethical and emotional. His men follow Gandhian values because he belongs to Gandhi era, and Gandhian values are truth, non-violence, service, and simplicity. Like Gandhi, they see manhood as moral courage. In global context, Patel's characters remind us of John Steinbeck. I recall the name of John Steinbeck's Joad family in his famous work, The Grapes of Wrath, or Thomas Hardy's Rural Man. If you remember Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak in his famous novel Far from the Madding Crowd, right? Or the Mayor of Casterbridge, right? So who wrestles with fate. Yet Patel's people remain quietly Gujarati. They face suffering with patience. They are guided by dharma and daya, that is virtue and compassion. When we read Narsi Mehta, it is very evident. When we read both of them together, Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel, those who want to do some research on Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel, I would be more than happy to give the ideas, because Gujarati literature is very rich, and especially when we talk about Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel, many people have done their research on these two great souls. But there is so much possibility that you can do research on them again and again. We see a moral, emotional thread running across 5 centuries, because Narsi Mehta belong to 15th century, Pannalal Patel 20th century. So the gap is of 500 years, and still there is a thread, there is a connection. Mehta speaks to the inner man, the seeker who finds strength in humility, love, and surrender. Patel speaks to the outer man, the one who faces the harsh world with honesty and endurance. Both, both these writers reject arrogance. Both believe compassion is greater than power and truth. And truth is the highest strength. Mehta's idea of manhood is about surrender to love, to truth, to life itself. Well, Patel's idea of manhood is about endurance, to staying true in the face of hardship. Together, they give us a distinctly Gujarati idea of masculinity: gentle yet strong, emotional yet ethical, spiritual yet deeply human. It is not about aggression, not about passivity. It is about balance. To be strong is also to be kind. To be human is also to be humble. From a global perspective, their ideas expand our understanding of what manhood can mean. They challenge the old dualities: strong versus weak, rational versus emotional, masculine versus feminine. In their works, real strength lies in moral courage, empathy, and the ability to endure without losing one's humanity. In that sense, Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel offer a shared philosophy that still speaks to us today. They remind us that being a true human being, man or woman, is not about control or dominance, but about understanding, about patience, and about love. Now, we can also look at some global parallels and see how these ideas remain relevant today, because human emotions are the same, human love is the same everywhere. So we can look at some global parallels and we can see how these ideas remain relevant today. Why to study Narsi Mehta? Why to study Pannalal Patel? Right? Narsi Mehta belonged to the 15th century and still he is relevant when we talk about masculinity and masculinity studies. When we look at Gujarati voices like Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel, in the larger context of world literature, some striking similarities begin to appear. Their ideas may have grown from Gujarati soil, but they reach out effortlessly to universal human concerns. Narsi Mehta's compassion and spiritual outlook remind us of writers like Lev Tolstoy, who search for truth beyond organized religion, and William Wordsworth, who found moral depth in ordinary human feelings. Like them, Narsi Mehta believed love and empathy weren't just personal emotions, they were sacred forces that held the world together. His songs carry the same spirit that inspired great humanists across the time: the belief that to feel deeply is to live honestly. Pannalal Patel, on the other hand, shares a kinship with writers like John Steinbeck, as I referred it earlier, and Anton Chekhov. He too saw the pain and dignity of common people, not as isolated stories, but as reflections of our shared humanity. His peasants and laborers in Gujarat, they speak the same emotional truth as Steinbeck's struggling farmers or Anton Chekhov's humble villagers. Each of these writers turned simple lives into powerful stories about endurance, about compassion, and about moral strength. When we read Mehta and Patel together, we find that they understood something modern psychology, something modern psychology has only recently begun to emphasize, that expressing emotion is not weakness but a sign of wholeness. The thing that we understand today was understood by these writers 500, 600 years before. They were already showing that real strength and sensitivity can exist together in one person. The message uh, feels especially relevant today. Modern masculinity is caught in strange tension. On one side, old expectations still tell men to be strong, to be logical, to be in control. On the other hand, the world now values empathy. The world values equality and emotional openness. Many men struggle to balance these two models, the tough provider and the caring partner. Movies and novels still glorify aggression and dominance, what we call angry young men type of thing. Yet they also begin to celebrate sensitivity and care. This contradiction lies at the center of masculinity studies, which asks an important question. And the question is, what does it really mean to be a man today? And this is where Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel speak to us again. They remind us that true manhood is not about power, it is not about wealth, or it is not about control. It is about conscience, compassion, and endurance. They show us that emotional courage is as real as physical bravery, and humility can be a greater strength than pride. Throughout their voices, we find a timeless truth that men can be emotional without being weak, humble without being submissive, and strong without being harsh. In that balance between heart and mind, tenderness and strength lies the vision of manhood that feels both ancient and beautifully modern. To sum up our journey, through different writers and traditions show how the idea of masculinity is never fixed. It changes with time, it changes with values, and it also changes with the culture. If uh, if we ask the question to somebody that what is masculinity studies, each and every person has a different answer. In the Elizabethan age, it might have been different if the question was asked, since it is ancient and modern both. It asks us to see gender not as something fixed by biology, but as a cultural and moral story, one that every civilization tells us in its own way. And throughout history, literature has been the truest mirror of that story. It shows us how societies imagine courage, emotion, and virtue in man. From Narsi Mehta, we learn that a true man is not the one who inspires fear, but the one who feels for others. He lives humbly, turns love into strength, and finds divinity in empathy. His idea of manhood blurs the line between spiritual and the emotional, teaching us that compassion is itself a kind of courage. From Pannalal, we learn another kind of strength, the strength to endure. His heroes are not kings or warriors like Shakespeare's heroes. They are farmers, they are simply workers and everyday men who face suffering with dignity. Patel reminds us that the bravest man is the one who remains kind in a crucial world, who keeps his integrity even when life tests him. Together, Narsi Mehta and Pannalal Patel give us a vision of masculinity that goes beyond gender politics. It is not simply about being male, it is about being moral. It is about being human and emotionally awake. Their works shift our focus from dominance to empathy, from pride to conscience, and from power to truth. In today's world, in the 21st century, where ideas of manhood are being debated, distorted, and redefined, their message feels more relevant than ever. They challenge the image of the aggressive, self centered man and offer a different ideal, one that values strength with sensitivity, courage, and with compassion. And perhaps that is the vision the world needs now, to humanize manhood, to remember that true masculinity is not about ruling others, but about ruling oneself. Remember, I would repeat, it is not about ruling others, it is about ruling the self with wisdom, restraint, and love. Thank you very much, all of you, for listening to me patiently and connecting with all of us. Bharat Mata ki Jai, Vande Mataram. Thank you very much for the great opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, madam.
Thank you so much, sir, for your thought-provoking lecture. Your rich insights, grounded in deep scholarship and vast experience, have given us a broader perspective on the theme of masculinity studies. The way you connected literary discourse with larger cultural and social frameworks was truly enlightening. We are sincerely grateful to you, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your expertise with us today. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
After these two enriching sessions, we are eager to hear from our guiding light, Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am. Ma'am, we request you to kindly share your thoughts and remarks on today's session. Ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Sarawade and Professor Vaja. After these exhaustive research presentations on masculinity studies, I don't think that I'm left with anything much to say. But yes, since this is my job here to give a couple of comments as ordered by Dr. Madhumita, so probably I will dare to give a few comments on both your lectures, which you may or may not even approve. So the first presentation, Professor Sarvade, you talked about masculinity studies as a theoretical study from social sciences, which is definitely acceptable to us. With the intervention of cultural studies into literature departments in 1970s and 80s, it started, I believe, or probably 70s. It started exactly when masculinity studies also got into literature departments. The same period, cultural studies, culture studies, and masculinity studies, they got into our departments, English or other literature departments. So now your paper is truly multidisciplinary, truly interdisciplinary, and truly multidisciplinary. That is something that is my takeaway. And then you also mentioned very interesting things like male feminist criticism. Like feminist criticism, everybody knows. Even Professor Vaja referred to that whenever it's masculinity studies and whenever it is gender, we think feminism. He truly mentioned that. So you talked about male feminist criticism, then monolithic understanding about gender. Unfortunately, our students have a very monolithic understanding of gender. So that is where seminars and lectures like this are good interventions. People can at least rethink. So I think after today's lecture, my colleagues and students will rethink gender. They will not think gender is equal to feminism. They will rethink gender. That is a takeaway from our young scholars here. And then you said that masculinity studies is more about human experiences, and then masculinity it's a social construct. Yes, very interesting things happen in our household as well. Sometimes if our sons will cry, our mothers will say, "Ladki jaise ro
Yes.
raha hai." So those kind of social constructs are very much there. We ignore those things, but those things should not be ignored. If somebody is crying, it's not like ladki jaise. A man can also cry. Even there is one movie, boys don't cry. There is one interesting movie, Boys Don't Cry. Boys do cry. So you pointed out such very fine and intricate things. Then sex and gender roles from psychology, from identity politics, from body politics. The many masculinities, it's something that I have been working on. I wrote a book, Kern, where I wrote about the many masculinities. Then you mentioned masculinity studies and subaltern studies. And then feminism at challenging hegemony of androcentric scholarships. I'm only quoting you. Then masculinity is not exactly men's studies, it's also women's studies, part of women's studies, yes. And then you mentioned as about male body. I got into thinking corporeality and body politics when you mentioned male body. Here I remember Padma Shri, late poet Jayant Mahapatra and his autobiography, Bhor Motiro Kanaphulo. That is in Odia, my mother tongue. Bhor means early morning, Moti ro Kanaphulo, earring. Moti ka kan ka earrings. So in that, he has, I think he's the only male poet who dares to talk about failed masculinity in intimate life. He has written very clearly that he got married at a very tender age when he was just a student, and then he had a gorgeous female, a gorgeous wife who was equally very strong. She was a feminist, she was a writer, she was a powerful woman, and then uh, it was kind of challenge to the masculinity of the poet, even if he loved her very dearly, very tenderly. But for the first few weeks and months of their marriage, her strength, her courage, her beauty, everything was kind of a challenge to the man. So he talked about body politics here. But in due course of time, the protagonist in the autobiography, he gets over that kind of fear psychosis of a very powerful woman, a bright woman, and then he becomes normal with her. If normal, I can put within quote unquote, and then the marriage becomes a beautiful one. But I don't think any other male poet has actually written about it, the failed masculinity of a man, in his autobiography. So when you talked about body politics and corporeality, I got into thinking about Jayanta Mahapatra, which is very, very interesting. Probably we can do a little bit more reading. We three being English professors, we should do a little bit of reading on Bhurmotiro Kanapula. I had shared the text with both of you. I'm glad that you are talking about it. And Jayanta Mahapatra is a great poet. I have done my PhD on him. And then also towards the end of your lecture, you took us once again towards something very social, very interdisciplinary, commercial, mass media, then the role of the state, politics and state in masculinity, and then black masculinities. My scholars have done PhDs on black masculinities. Then the middle class, white middle class man as a hegemony, then masculinity of empire, masculinity of post-colonial countries, and the multiple questions thereof. So many things, it's very exhaustive, and I have taken down all these notes. When you both were speaking, I was taking down notes. So I thoroughly enjoyed your lecture. Many, many congratulations for delivering such a pertinent and a meaningful lecture for us. You are going to be a part of history of Hindi University because we have preserved you in our YouTube channel, and it was a very meaningful lecture. We will talk about it more when we get back to the syllabus design. And thanks to Dr. Madhumita for inviting a good scholar like you. And now, coming to Professor Vaja, again, I thoroughly enjoyed. Both of us have one common thing in us, Indian knowledge systems. So, on off and on, we both go towards that. Even if we have been talking about anything else, we go towards that. Very, very unidimensional sometimes. So Professor Vaja started with literary texts and Indian knowledge systems, and then English studies. Yes, we are English teachers, so English studies will certainly and definitely or unfailingly will definitely come to us. Then the feminism questions and the identities thereof, social norms of masculinity and femininity, if I can use the term femininity here, and then the relational masculinity uh, with femininity. Then R.W. Cornell, that is a very famous book. Everyone should read that. I will get copies of that book for our library. I'll ask Madhumita to procure that copy for our library. And then you also mentioned the other Western and Indian theorists of masculinity studies. And then something very interesting, gender and power. Madhumita, you take note. Probably you should do some research on gender and power and take guidance from Professor Vaja. Then Judith Butler, definitely everyone should read, and the gender roles. Then the Renaissance and Shakespearean masculinity, Hamlet, Macbeth, and King Lear, and all of them, the Renaissance men. Then industrialism and masculinity studies, Indian knowledge systems and Krishna consciousness, and the idea of real men. in Indian knowledge systems. Then moral courage and the inner courage of manhood in Indian literature. Yes. And then the bhakti literature and masculinity. Then masculinity as a literature of empathy, sympathy, flexibility, and inclusivity. That is something that you extensively talked about, that to be a real man is to be inclusive, to be flexible, to reach out to humanity, not just for men. And then you gave a lot of examples from Gujarati literature, where I am rather informed. I didn't have much of information on Gujarati literature. I have taken the names of the texts. I'm going to definitely read them in English translation, and of course get back to you for further discussion. I'm thoroughly enriched by both of you. Thank you very, very much on behalf of Hindi University, the faculty, staff, researchers, and students. And this research will continue. Thanks once again. Yes, Madhumita?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your thoughtful and inspiring remarks. Your guidance and words of wisdom are always a source of great motivation for all of us. Okay, we will now move to the question and answer session, a valuable opportunity for interaction. Dear participants, if you have any questions, reflections, or comments for our speakers, you are most welcome to share them now. You may either raise your hand, unmute and speak, or post your questions in the chat box also. We will take them one by one. If you have any questions or any query. So I think there is no question, sir. So we'll move on. Okay. As we come to the conclusion of this meaningful and intellectually enriching comparative world literature webinar on masculinity studies, it is my honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing committee. First and foremost, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nandini Sahu, Madam, for gracing this event with her inspiring words. Ma'am, your vision, encouragement, and leadership have been a constant source of motivation for all of us. Your message has truly set a scholarly and thoughtful tone for this session. A special note of thanks to our distinguished speakers, Dr. A.M. Sarawade sir and Dr. Iros Vaja sir, for their insightful, thought-provoking, and enlightening lectures. Your deep scholarship and perspectives have enriched our understanding of the theme in powerful and multidimensional ways. I also express my warm thanks to our convener, Dr. Paramita Das Madam. A sincere thanks to all faculty members, research scholars, students, and participants who joined us today. Your active engagement and warm presence made this event truly meaningful. Finally, a big thank you to the technical and organizing teams for ensuring the smooth and seamless conduct of this webinar. With gratitude to everyone who made this day a success, I wish that the discussions we have had today continue to inspire research, reflection, and meaningful academic work. So, thank you all once again. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you so much.
Okay, congratulations, Madhumita. You did it successfully. Okay, so namaskar, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
We will
Yeah.
meet very, very soon, Professor Sarawade and Professor Vaja.
Yes, yes, madam. Yes.
Let's meet soon. Okay then.
Okay.
Namaskar.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. बहुत बढ़िया.
Thank you.
चल.